Hey there! So in the last video I've built a Raspberry Pi cluster and it's working fine. But let me guess, you won't find out what was the first thing I wanted to do with it. Okay, to be honest, I wanted to shut it down, and by that I mean properly, not just unplugging the power cord or something like that. And then I just asked myself the question, okay, but how do you shut down a bunch of Raspberry Pis properly altogether? And I mean not one by one. Or how do you reboot them? How do you install or update software on them? Yeah, interesting question. And yeah, I came up with a few tricks. So if you're interested, keep watching. Okay, so you're probably asking yourself, what is Ansible? What is this guy dragging me into this time? And then you see this page and you're ready to close the video because, well, enterprise solution for building and operate automation at scale, and free trial and products and Red Hat Ansible and whatnot. So this sounds like something scary and expensive and for big companies and whatnot. Well, let me show you, this is all marketing when it comes to using Ansible at home on your home server for free. So let's check it out. Let me demonstrate it to you. For that, we will just start a VM. Yeah, I know, many of you don't like VMs and more like into Raspberry Pis and running small home servers, but for this time I'm using a VM just to show you that how easy to install and use it on a bare Linux installation. So just bear with me, let's speed up the video and let's do this installation. So what we will create is a VM with 1 GB of RAM, which is pretty much like a Raspberry Pi 3. Okay, so here we go. We have a fresh VM running Ubuntu 20, and this is basically the most complicated part. Ubuntu 20 and all the modern Linux distros come with Python 3 by default installed. You can check this by typing Python 3, and there you go. We have it. This is pretty much standard. And the other requirement is to have SSH access to the machines you want to remotely access. And that is because Ansible is pretty much a serverless tool. Serverless in this case means that you don't have to install anything on those machines you want to maintain. You just need to install Ansible here on your controller machine, be it a VM or a Raspberry Pi again. Or anything like that running Linux. So given we have Python 3, we can start installing Ansible and then we will see what this whole thing is about. So to install it, you need to have a few commands. So sudo apt install python 3 pip. This is a requirement. And this is just for installing further packages for Python, packages that will Ansible rely on. So this will take a few seconds, and then we install Ansible itself. Here we go. So we have just installed pip, which is like an installer, as I said, and then we will install Ansible with pip. So pip3 install Ansible. And there we go, we have Ansible. Now the fun part. So Ansible itself is a command line tool. You will see how easily you can use it. Although, yeah, I admit that having a command line tool is not really the most comfortable solution. Actually, there are different UI packages which can sit on top of Ansible out there. There are lightweight ones or complicated, heavy-duty ones, but as you will see, command line is also pretty convenient. So at this point we can run Ansible, but it won't do too much. So we can, let's say, check whether it is running. If you see this, you just need to relog in. I don't know why this is happening. You do not type sudo apt install Ansible because it will install another version of Ansible and will mess up things. So you just relog in at this point. Okay, so as you can see, after relogin, the whole command works again. So at this point, you could start wondering whether this is a really weird tutorial. I mean, I haven't really said a word about Ansible, but I've already told you how to install it. What if you don't like it? Well, that was intentional. And that is because of all the hype and all the, let's say, mystery surrounding Ansible. So from one point of view, it is like an admin tool, an IT guy tool, and you know, what does this have to do with your home automation system and your Raspberry Pi running your media center or your Octoprint or whatever? And on the other hand, you will see this is quite easy. And Ansible has a really pleasant learning curve. So you can do a lot with it. I mean, I've seen tutorials where they administered expensive enterprise-grade routers with it. Not just servers, but routers. I mean, physical devices. And cloud servers, or you name it. But on the other hand, you can just do really simple things with it, like issue a command and say hello world, like when you are doing a basic Unix shell script. So it's like a Swiss Army knife, and you can start by using it in a very, very simple way, which for long term will be fit for the average user. And you don't have to be a DevOps guy, an engineer, a software developer, or nothing like that. But you have to accept that by default, yeah, it's a command line tool. Okay, so I think that was quite a long intro, and yeah, I explained my motivation and we installed Ansible and whatnot, so time to do some magic. For starter, we will need a short configuration. This is really just a minimalistic configuration. Ansible documentation literally lists dozens of various parameters and whatnot, and to be honest, I'm barely scratching the surface. Anyway, what we will work with is basically my Raspberry Pi cluster. So it has 3 nodes running at the moment, 2 of them running Ubuntu, 1 of them running some older version of Raspbian and whatnot, so we will have some variety at this point. So we can just ping them to make sure that we can access them, like there we go. Then we can do the same with node 2 and then node 3. Good. So let's assume that these are your media center or Octoprint instances or whatnot, and we want to shut them down, reboot them, update them, do some backup on them, just ping them, install some package on them or whatever, without actually accessing those one by one. For the simplest way to use Ansible, there are 2 configuration files needed. One is called ansible.cfg and the other is called hosts file. Now the ansible.cfg file, which is normally located in /etc/ansible, is pretty much a generic configuration file. it contains, or it can contain, a lot of parameters, and these parameters are well described in the manual of Ansible. For now, the most important is this one. I will later explain what does this mean and why do we need it. All those parameters that are listed in the documentation have their default values, hence you don't really have to care about them too much, for now at least. This video is in no way a full Ansible tutorial, so I will just go on with the other configuration file, which is, as I mentioned, the host file. Now the host file is also referred as an inventory in Ansible terms, and this is pretty much the description of all the servers you want to manage with Ansible. So you can see that this is a kind of hierarchical data which starts with all, which means the whole configuration. Then for each group, because these are groups, for each groups there's a section called vars, which is a collection of configuration parameters for the given group, and there's one called children, which is the child groups listed there for the given group. And ultimately there's also one for each group called hosts, which is a list of servers. So let's go through this one quickly. I have the all group, which is like the root, and I have this configuration. We can ignore this for now. Then we have children of this group, or to be precise, one child. This is my Raspberry Pi cluster, so I named it Raspberry Pi cluster. Then for that I also defined children. You will later understand why did I create one node groups here, because these are subgroups. Node 1 is a one node subgroup, then node 2 is also a subgroup, node 3 is also a subgroup, and each subgroup there's a separate node. So a list of hosts there, and with a single host. This is just a host name that I associated with the IP address of the given node, so I don't have to fiddle around with IP addresses. This is just more convenient and human readable. Also, as you can see, you can specify just the node name, or the node domain name, the full qualified domain name, or the IP address here, or you can go into details like having the node, then a separate port if you are not using the default SSH port, and the user. So in the case of node 1 and 3, I'm using common user, but this node 2 is special. It has a different user and a different port, so I had to have this extended kind of configuration here. You can have the password also listed here, but not as a clear text password, but I'm not going into details about that right now. It's a bit of a complicated, involves something called a vault, which is a file that stores your passwords for the different nodes and whatnot. So yeah, let's just ignore it for now. In my simple case, basically I set the same password for all the nodes, and because of that, when Ansible is running, it will just ask for a password and it will be applied for all the nodes. Yeah, I know that this is not the best way to use it, but I wanted to stay really simple with this example and concentrate on what can we do with Ansible instead of how we are doing it. So we have the nodes set up here, and then, yeah, pretty much this is the minimalistic configuration. Okay, so what else do we need? Ansible has an expression called a playbook. A playbook is pretty much like a script, but you don't have to be a software developer or an IT guy to understand it. It's like just more like a definition of commands or operations. Let me show you one. So this is a YAML file. If you have worked with Home Assistant and stuff like that in the past, you have pretty much probably seen a YAML file. So each playbook has a name, and then there are some parameters like whether the connection type, what the connection type being used. This is pretty much most case it's SSH. This is like a basic, because most Linux servers have SSH remote access enabled in one way or another. Then we have the list of default hosts here, hosts. So you might remember that within the inventory or the host file there was a group called Raspberry Pi cluster. It means that if I specify otherwise, this playbook, this list of commands or list of operations will be running on this group, which means the whole cluster. Then I mentioned before that I have a default remote user. This is Ubuntu, except for the second node, for which it was Maniac. Then we have this command, or this parameter become :yes. This means that this is pretty much the let's say alternative expression for sudo. So when you are issuing a command with sudo on a Linux command line, then this is what is behind in Ansible. So these are the commands here, like shell uname, then shell uptime. These are just two very simple commands. I will explain these in a minute. So if you want to run them as root, you normally enter sudo uname -a, not like you need sudo for uname, but whatever, this is just a demo. And instead of typing sudo here, you have to tell this way to Ansible that you want to have them run as an administrative user. Okay, now on to the commands. Actually, Ansible, with Ansible terminology, we are using them tasks, because we can do a lot more than executing shell commands. Again, I'm barely scratching the surface here, but from our point of view, executing simple shell commands on multiple Raspberry Pis at once, it's already really helpful. So for example, we have this task here. For each task you can assign a name, and I named this one get OS info, which means that with uname-a we will get some information from the operating system. Now the next line means that whatever result will be returned via the SSH connection from this command, I mean the output of the command, will be loaded into a variable called shell_result1. And in the next task, which is print OS info, we will have a section called debug, and it says that var, as in variable, shell_result1, so this variable should be used as a debug output. You will see how this looks like. And then we have another task for querying uptime of the server, and then another debug task for displaying what we got as a result from the previous task. So this is easy, just two commands getting some info for us via SSH, and then two debug outputs for that info. So now we have the configuration and the playbook. And I also prepared some other playbooks for the demonstration. So let's have some fun and let's see how this works in the practice. So to execute a playbook, you have to use a command line tool that comes with Ansible installation. It's called Ansible Playbook. So this is the binary, and there are quite a few parameters, but for this very simple task we can just provide the playbook name. So, and there we go. SSH password. Remember, for this setting, for this situation, I have the same password for all of the nodes. So just a single password. And we run into a problem. So you need to install an additional dependency. Yeah, I forgot to mention this at the start, but it's quite easy. So it's just a little program called SSH pass. In case of Ubuntu, it's sudo apt install SSH pass. Cool, now we have it too. Actually, this is a good practice, so you see what problems you can run into with clean installation of Ansible. So let's try again. The error message means that the operating system we are using right now, I mean this VMs, the host operating system we're running Ansible on, is checking authenticity of the servers. And because the servers are not yet known, you have to, let's say, introduce them to each other, which means that at least once you have to successfully log into the servers via SSH from this host. So it means that, let's do, for example, for the first node, SSH username at hostname or IP address, which in my case is node1.rp cluster.lan. And yeah, you see, this is what I told you, can't establish the authenticity yet. So let's continue, and now it's added to the list of known hosts. So I just need to enter my password, then I can log out and do the same twice, once for each node actually. Okay, yeah, I'm in, exit, and then do it for node 3 as well. Yeah, same. And I skipped node 2 because it has a different user, as you might remember from the configuration part. Oops. Yeah, and a different port. So -p, and there we go. Password once again. We can leave. And now we can try to run our playbook once again. Okay, so we have issued 2 commands. One is was asking about the operating system. As you can see, these are the individual responses from the servers. So first one is running this kernel version, then the second one is running a different kernel version, and so on. And then we ask for the uptime, and you can see it's running for 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, because I've rebooted the server 10 minutes ago. So this is how it looks like in practice. Now we can run other playbooks just to see a bunch of different functionalities we can use. So I've created different playbooks, like installing Midnight Commander. This is just a little useful tool, and for demonstration purposes we will install and uninstall it from each of the nodes with a single command. So let's change the playbook, and let's say install. By the way, when it is running, this gathering fact part is So it just collects various information about the host. It is running the commands again, like operating system, hardware, and so on. And as you might remember, when I show you the configuration, there was a configuration value which disabled some kind of this fact gathering, and actually that is because these facts, these infos are collected into various categories, and the more facts are being gathered, it means the more time it takes. And actually, if you don't need those, and right now I don't need those, then I can just turn them off, so fact gathering becomes faster, and because of that the whole playbook execution becomes faster. Actually, you can disable fact gathering at once for the whole, the whole functionality, but yeah, this is something I'm still experimenting with. Anyway, in the meantime, our playbook has finished, so you can see that these are the outputs from the apt install and uninstall commands. And yeah, as you can see, with a single command we have installed and then uninstalled a piece of software on 3 of the nodes, but that could have been like 100 nodes at the same time or something like that. So this is how powerful Ansible can be. Now let's see another playbook. So we can reboot clusters, shut down, update. We can actually ping them. So let's just ping. Actually, Ansible has a built-in ping command for the hosts, but I just made mine because why the hell not? This is the result. And this is how the playbook looks like. So just a simple invocation. Actually, as you can see, these parts can be a bit different. So this is what we call a task, and there are dozens of different tasks already built in. So ping without parameters, then you can have shell. Then, as I said, I'm actually just scratching the surface. Shell seems to be the most useful because it lets you run any command on the remote host. Anyway, I think I've shown enough for this video. The whole purpose of this video was just to show you what I have found out about Ansible, and how I plan to use it in the future to manage my cluster, or actually manage other servers around the house and other machines. Because you might not think of it, but for example, if you have a media player, Raspberry Pi, that needs updates from time to time, or you want to backup data from it, or change passwords, or change some configuration, then without actually logging in to the instance, you can just do everything with Ansible. And if you need to do it on a regular basis, like backing up data or something like that, or updating passwords, then yeah, having all these already implemented as playbooks is incredibly useful and helpful. So let me close this video with a question. Do you think Ansible can be useful in your situation? Do you want me to make any more videos on Ansible? Because regardless of the majority of the answers for this question, I think I will be using Ansible. It's worth learning, especially if you're into IT and DevOps and cloud and stuff like that. And yeah, from this day I will pretty much use it to manage my cluster, my media player, Raspberry Pis, and my main server, and so on. Anyway, I think this was quite a long video, and I tried to cram as much information as I could, so I hope you liked it. And yeah, thanks for watching it. As usual, Please feel free to leave feedback in the comments and hit a thumbs up if you like the video, and hope to see you next week with another video. Bye! Hey, thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, hit like. If you want to help my channel and see more of my content, hit subscribe. If you want to check out behind the scenes and want to know more about me, then follow me on social media. You can find the links here. Thank you again, and see you next time.